So what we have behind us is a 1956 Douglas DC-6. This airplane has flown all around the world. It has flown all over the state of Alaska. It has helped to build the state of Alaska, flying fuel and freight to the remote villages that just cannot be accessed by larger aircraft like 737s and so on. So there is a ton of history in this airplane here. To get it here, it came from Fairbanks. And to even find a DC-6, you're like, how do you even go about buying one of these things? It took months and months of us calling around to everyone we knew, putting the word out there that we were looking for some sort of large aircraft, some sort of airplane that we could turn into an airplane house. And finally, we came across Everett's Air Cargo up in Fairbanks. They had some retired DC-6s where these have just flown for so many hours, so long, that the airframes simply time out, or they just cannot be flown anymore economically. So to save this airplane, November 888 Delta Golf, November 888 DG, from the scrapyard being turned into beer cans, well, we purchased it. And once we were the proud owners of it, then the reality set in of, how on earth are we going to get a 117-foot wide, 104-foot long airplane from Fairbanks, 300 miles, almost 350 miles down here to Big Lake, just north of Anchorage? Luckily, moving big loads in Alaska is kind of a common thing, but there are some restrictions, like bridges that we had to go over, some large rivers that are enclosed, and we could only move a 24-foot wide load and maximum 17.6 high. That was it. It flat out wasn't going to move if it was any taller or any wider than that. There was no way around it. And no, you're not gonna pick this thing up with a helicopter. It weighs a whole lot, even a big helicopter. No, you're not gonna use 2 helicopters either. I know you're thinking about it, I did too. So to get this thing here, we had to cut the wings off, break them into several sections. They do unbolt at some places. Towards the center of the airplane, we actually had to run through with saws and break the wings off of the airplane, load those wings onto separate trailers, and then move the fuselage as one gigantic piece on a very extended 93-foot long trailer with quite a bit of overhang on the front and overhang on the back there. That was about a 2-day long process to get it moved down here. The overall process of disassembling it, luckily, that went a lot smoother than I had expected with the help of the folks at Everett's Air Cargo up in Fairbanks. Buck was a huge help up there and really guided us through the process of what we had to do. He had tons of experience with the airplane of where we should cut, where we shouldn't, and how we should grab hold of it to actually separate it without doing much damage to the aircraft itself. That took about 4 days to disassemble it, get it loaded onto trailers, and then 2 days of moving to get it down here. Once it was finally here, the airplane sat from October of last year until about May. We did a little bit of work on it throughout the winter, getting it insulated, spray foamed, that sort of stuff, trying to bring it all together and get as much of a head start on it as we could before summer really hit. Not bad for day one. See if we can get all this stuff wrapped up tomorrow. Well, I would not call that ADA accessible, but it's a heck of a lot better than what we had before. So yeah, it's a lot easier to walk up into the cockpit now. We're gonna get rid of this beam right here, last piece to come out there. And boy, that stuff is stout. It's actually pretty cool. I think we're gonna be able to reuse that I-beam that we took out for some project around here. Don't really know for what, but giant heavy-duty aluminum I-beam probably is going to come in handy. Construction officially started May 1st of 2023, where we were going to town, laying subfloor, pulling radiant heat throughout the airplane, getting things installed, trying to figure out how we were going to make curved studs using PVC and plastic studs to make those curves. Fast forward just a couple hours here, and we've got subfloor down. So this is whatever, 23-30 seconds, basically 3/4 of an inch subfloor. We're gonna come back and router this once we get some chalk lines on it and get some idea of where our PEX is gonna run for heated floors. Can't believe my brand new chalk line. Only got to use it once from Home Depot. My crummy little DeWalt chalk box, wherever it went, was going in the garbage after one use. Go back to my old one. So yeah, a little over 8 feet wide is what we got. and we got these little extra pieces that we're throwing in there. Routed out some of our own, just so we weren't wasting a whole bunch. Made some grooves for our tongue and groove so we could get those little pieces and not have to cut up a whole bunch of boards and have huge drop pieces that we have nothing to do with. Got all that stacked up ready to go for tomorrow, and now for the rest of the night, my project is to mess with our PVC studs, essentially, because tongue and groove, we loaded a whole truckload of tongue and groove into the plane just to unload it and take it all back out, because we figured out it is not going to work. We're going to have to do shiplap for that back bedroom. It is just too tight of walls. I'm not sure if tongue and groove is going to work at all in these airplanes. I think it's going to be shiplap all the way. A little bit bummed about that. I was hoping to use tongue and groove. I like the way it looks, but we're going to have to come up with some sort of system to it, because making these bends and these curves, man, it is tight. So get our PVC stud up, and that PVC will take the brad nails for the shiplap to go up all the way around it. We'll see if I can get this screwed in here. Going through these ribs right here, that's actually some pretty darn strong aluminum in this old airplane. We had no way to put curved studs or join the dormers to the airplane. We were struggling with that. Finally, with a combination of plastic and pressure treated plywood cut into thin strips and then screwed to the airplane, we were able to make those curves. We also figured out that framing up the interior walls, kind of tricky when the airplane wasn't on level ground in the first place, but we were able to overcome that. Figured out that shiplap was some of the best material to use because it did allow us to grow those gaps and slide as we made those extreme bends and curves. And really, it's not that it's just a round structure that you're working inside of, it's that you're working inside of a round tapered structure. And that makes essentially an extra dimension of curving and scribing that you have to take into account. Yeah, using a shipwright would have been awesome. Guys that build boats would have been super helpful. We didn't have any of that here. Once we finally had most of the interior built, we had tried hiring a welder who said he could weld the wings back on. Turns out he couldn't. He lasted about a day before he gave up, and then we went ahead over to Ace Hardware, bought some scraps of aluminum, bought some bolts, bolted the wings back onto the aircraft, and then had to lift the airplane back up to get the landing gear down so we could actually tow it all the way over to this final spot. Now, it would make a lot more sense as to if we just built it on site in its final spot. Would have been so much better. But we didn't have that option. And if you've been following along on Instagram, on Facebook, you would know why we didn't have that option. Go ahead and comment below why we had to wait to actually get it here on the piles and get it on its final foundation. But once we had those wings on, we used the excavator, which wasn't quite strong enough to lift the whole airplane. And we used it to just kind of wiggle the wings up slowly, little by little, with pallets under one side, wiggle it on up, get the landing gear down. And then we were able to tow the airplane down here, drag it back onto its foundation. Of course, again, we had the pipes in the ground. We didn't have a crane to lift it up onto the pipes. So how do you deal with that? What do you do? And our solution to that was, well, bring in a bunch more fill dirt, dump a bunch more dirt here, compact it all, wheel the airplane up over the pipes, and then take two guys with shovels and slowly dig on both sides of those tires while one guy stands back and watches and says, hey, yeah, more on the backside, more on the front side, to keep the airplane from rolling off the pipes and slowly let it eat its way down into the dirt and settle down onto those pipes. Ultimately, there is no how-to on how to do this stuff. I mean, you can say people have done it before, people have made airplane houses, but in all honesty, not knocking them, nobody's made an airplane house that looks like this when it's done. Nobody's put shiplap, tongue and groove, heated floors, and tiled showers inside of an airplane house. So there isn't a how-to. It's a lot of trying to figure this out, and more importantly, it hasn't been done in Alaska, where we have a fairly extreme climate. We do see 80 degrees in the summer sometimes on our hottest days, but we also see -30 in the winter. And ensuring that that aluminum structure is not going to sweat and condensate and create moisture and mold problems was a big challenge to overcome. This has to be here, well, hopefully for the next 50 years. And we have to make sure it's going to last, and we do not want to remodel an airplane house. We want to build one and be done with it and have it finished. So ensuring that it was done to that level was a challenge, because no one really had ever done that, and there there isn't a manual for it. Where can you screw to? Where can you bolt to? What's strong and what isn't? You just have to figure it out as you go. And certainly using resources like the more experienced mechanics and pilots that have been flying these airplanes and maintaining them for decades are a huge resource to bat around ideas, but it's all out of the box stuff. When you talk about attaching tile to aluminum aircraft ribs, that's not something that your average airframe and power plant mechanic does, and I don't believe it's on the A&P test for the FAA either. So certainly a unique challenge to overcome, trying to figure out how to do this. And there were plenty of mistakes made along the way. It's now 8 p.m. Everybody else has gone home. That's coming along, but the front still needs to get finished. I'm not gonna walk out there because I'm tired and I'd fall. But no wingtips, no tail feathers. And this thing, trying to get this pretty soffit on here, gets a little interesting as it gets pinched in there. The only way I could figure out how to get these things to stick is to first nail on nailers and then nail through here into the rafter. And that'll actually make them stick, because you certainly can't get a nail gun underneath there, as I found out. And yeah, one more day tomorrow, another 14 hours at it. We'll see if we get it pulled off. But aren't those lights pretty? Yeah. Insulation, decking, T111, maybe some metal details, and just get this thing wrapped up, just for the moment anyways, and then probably another couple months of work after we actually get through this first deadline. Once we got the airplane moved here onto its foundation, dug the dirt out around the tires, it settled in. All of a sudden we had too much sand and dirt around it. We had to start scraping that away, and we had to get power, water, and sewer out to the airplane. Here in Alaska, well and septic is the most common. To try to save a little bit of money in this process, rather than drilling a new well on the property, we went ahead and tapped into one of our existing wells about 1,000 feet away, and we had to run 1,000 feet of 1-inch pipe underground 10 feet deep. That is our frost line here in Alaska, is 10 feet. So we have to dig and trench 10 feet deep. As you're trenching, the material we have around here varies between gravel and sand. Those trenches love to collapse, so it's kind of sketchy to have a guy down in there. And you have to be pretty careful getting all that in the ground. Now, for those of you that know anything about wells, the well is a well pump down in the well, 1,000 feet away from the airplane. We had to then bring power 1,000 feet to the airplane, which means big, heavy, expensive wire, because the longer you run, the big, heavier wire you need, otherwise you get a big voltage drop. Now, your average well is told when to turn on and turn off by the pressure tank, which is in the airplane, which maintains pressure so that when you turn on the faucet, it's a fairly steady stream. It's not kind of like coming and going. So that's how, when you have well water in your house, you have a nice steady delivery of water pressure. Now, to do that, typically they'll run wire to the pressure switch off your main electrical panel and then back to the well. But that would involve running the electrical power 1,000 feet here and 1,000 feet back to power up that well pump. We really didn't want to do that. That would involve thousands and thousands more dollars in wire just to go into the ground to power that well pump. So how we overcame that was doorbell wire. In case you're curious, 500 feet of doorbell wire, 3 ohms of resistance. If you don't know what ohms are, you should be watching our aircraft systems course online at fly@mikealpha.com to learn about electricity and how that works in airplanes. It works the same way in houses. So we ran 24 volt, 18.3 wire back to the well pump to a relay, and 6 ohms of resistance was enough that that pressure switch could close. And it wasn't too great, so it would actually allow that relay to activate and supply 120 volt power to the well, sending that water down here. So yes, now we have terrific water flow, terrific water pressure in the airplane. We have a septic tank for, well, you know what. And as far as our heat, here in Alaska, we don't have a lot of natural gas around, so we do have in-floor heat for the aircraft, and that is powered by an oil boiler. So we essentially have a 300-gallon oil tank or diesel tank outside the airplane, and that is what helps keep the airplane warm, and we simply fill that off of a truck about once a month or so in the winter. In the summer, really not at all. Now, why we started doing this was, well, aside from probably bumping my head too many times and bad turbulence or something like that, we were building cabins alongside of our private runway here that we have students staying in when they come do flight training with us here in Alaska. And the price of OSB at the time was like $58 a sheet. Historically, it was more around like the $7 to $10 range. So it was crazy expensive, and all the cost of lumber was so expensive. We're like, hey, you know what would be great? If we could find a way to save money on this OSB, if we had an already done structure like an airplane house, you know, or an airplane, that doesn't need sheathing and studs and all this stuff. We could build this super cheap and we could have cheaper housing. We should go buy a used airplane. Well, fast forward, you know, like a year later, it's not cheaper. The price of lumber did come down, but that has nothing to do with it. It was so much more money and so much more time than ever anticipated. Because yeah, you think you already have a dried-in structure, but there's a reason people aren't doing this all over the world. It's really hard. It's really expensive. And quite frankly, if you're looking for a space, it is going to be cheaper to build it out of stick frame. That is why everybody does it that way. For anyone who wants to have an airplane house in their backyard, I hope you live in Arizona. That would be a much better climate for this. And I hope you have a lot of time and money. If you're doing it to save money, it's not gonna happen. If you're doing it because it's quick and easy, you're wrong. Would I do all of this again, knowing what I know now? I'm not the brightest guy, so maybe, but I would certainly think twice about it. Unfortunately, at this point, we've got 3 airplanes on the property, and well, they'll look better as houses than they will just as yard art. So we are going to complete those projects. This one is done and ready for guests, ready for students to stay in. We've got our DC-9 that is well underway right now. We're expecting to have that up and running for you in summer of 24, as well as the Boeing 727, which is actually a huge airplane, over 1,200 square feet of interior space. Pretty good sized house if you ask me. And that one is going to come complete with a rooftop deck because, you know, if you have a T-tail, you got these mountain views, you gotta have a rooftop deck. Now, as far as other projects we got going on here, we also have the control tower going up, and that will be the control tower cabin, so you get the full 360 views of the mountains and the Aurora Borealis, the northern lights here, which are absolutely spectacular all winter long as it gets a little darker for us. And if you've ever thought about visiting Alaska, I would highly encourage you to come check it out in the winter, because yes, you think it's dark and cold and all those things, and some of that's true, but you might just be surprised. It's late October right now, and it is a beautiful day here, sunny, and we have plenty of daylight even all throughout the winter, and really good flying as well. The last steps in building the airplane, once we had it here on the foundation, was to get it fully dried in. So we knew we wanted a little bit of extra interior space when you first walked into the airplane, a place to put your luggage, spread out, do laundry, all of that. We wanted to have a washer and dryer in the unit here. And so we built that larger dormer and attached that to the airplane. Kind of tricky figuring out how to make that wood curve and meet the airplane and be water and airtight, but that was a cool project. Drove extra pilings on the ground to support it. The other pilings that are holding the airplane up are driven 20 feet down, not to bedrock. We don't really have a lot of bedrock around here, but into good gravel to really support the airplane through any sort of seismic or any sort of frost heaving, anything like that, to make sure it's going to be a nice stable platform forever, and that it doesn't feel like you're walking around in a bouncy RV or a bouncy trailer when you're staying in there. The dormer went on over the back cargo door, and then we got the dormer on for the front there. That allowed us to have that nice double doors going out to the wing deck, let in a lot of light into the kitchen area there, create that really nice view if you are cooking in the kitchen or if you want to hang out on the wing deck. And we wanted a little extra light compared to what we already had window-wise. Being a cargo airplane, not a whole lot of windows in it, so we added one more window onto the right side of the aircraft, figuring out, again, how to air seal and water seal that in, make it, basically take a flat window and make it meet a round airplane. Kind of tricky there. If you come in, you go out, or what do you do? But luckily we're able to solve all those issues as they came up, and it really was just making it up as we went, trying different sealants, then it rained, that didn't work, trying spray foam, then it rained, that didn't work, and just continuously chipping away at it until we found something that did work. And luckily just in time for winter to hit. I was hoping to have a few more of these airplanes completed this summer, but it is a longer process than anticipated. And so once we finally got the dormers on, got it all air and water sealed, it was time to get the wings put back on as well. We had to bolt up the extra wing tips on there and get the tail section rebuilt. So we got the horizontal and vertical stabilizers reattached. Luckily, I had some friends come out and give us a hand with that, because it's like we said, it's a little bit making it up as you go. I do not have the right equipment or the right slings and all that fancy crane stuff to do it the way you're supposed to if you're actually working on one of these airplanes, trying to keep it airworthy to fly through the air. This really, knowing that's never going to fly again, or hopefully it never flies again unless we have a really strong wind, we wanted to just get it done, but make it done in a safe way so we could count on the wings to support the weight of people hanging out in the swings underneath the wing, or that big surprise that we've got going up on the wingtip itself, and making sure it was all structurally sound. So friends came over, that was a cool day, hanging the wingtips back on there, getting the vertical and horizontal stabilizers on. We do not have the flight controls on the airplane yet. The ailerons, elevator, rudder are not on the airplane yet. We're leaving them off through the winter to see how the airplane handles in 80 to 100 mile an hour winds as we have some of those winter storms roll through here. And if all goes well and the snow load goes well, then we'll go ahead and start adding the flaps, ailerons, elevator, and rudder back to the aircraft, making it whole again, and hopefully giving this old bird a home, well, hopefully longer than I'll be around for. So it's cool to be able to take it apart, move it here, put it all back together, and then see what it's become on the inside there. Definitely more than my dreams were, more than I had really envisioned in my head when we first started. It was one of those things of when we're spending all that time and money, might as well spend a little bit more time and money and make it really nice and something super special. And I'm super happy with the way it turned out. Really excited to be able to share it with all of you. If you guys are interested in staying here, check out our flight training packages and our air tour packages on our website. The link is in the description below at fly@mikealpha.com. If you're interested in becoming a pilot, fly@mikealpha.com, that's the name right there. Private pilot ground school courses, private pilot written prep, Checkride prep, instrument pilot commercial, CFI, tailwheel, all that stuff, all the courses you need, all your book work to be done before you actually attend flight training. You can do all that on our website there at fly@mikealpha.com. And if you're interested in just staying here, no interest in flying or becoming a pilot or any of that stuff, if you just want to spend the night in the airplane, it is listed on Airbnb, and that link is in the description as well. You can go ahead and book a night there or several, feel free. And we look forward to seeing you here in Alaska at the Fly at Mike Alpha Pilot Lodge at the DC-6 Airplane House.